Hello and welcome to part 3 of chapter 2. So in this part we are going to discuss about different ratios. So why are ratios important? Ratios are important because it enables you to compare between different companies. So let's say you can compare Apple and Samsung. So comparison between different companies, as well as you can see performance of a company over time. So either you compare one company over time, that is Apple, how it is performing in 2020 versus how it performed in 2019, and it also helps to compare between competitors or between even different industries. So ratios are important for comparison, and it's a great tool and it's an important tool in financial managers arsenal, as well as it is important for your quizzes and final exams too. So I'll cover each ratio and then we'll try to calculate ratios through Bloomberg. Okay. So first is gross margin, or we'll do it as we go. So first is gross margin. What does gross margin indicate? It is a ratio of gross profit that the company is making divided by sales that the company is making. So it indicates how are the sales translating into gross profit. It indicates how are the sales translating into gross profit, or it shows how efficiently the company is managing direct costs related to product. How efficiently the company is managing direct costs related to product. So let's do it for Apple. So it is sales divided by gross profit. So you have to go to income statement. Revenue is, let's say, last 12 months, so 273, and gross profit is 104. So how do you calculate this ratio? 104 divided by 273, gross profit divided by sales or net income. So 38% gross profit in 2020. So let's compare it with 2019. 2019 it was 98 over 260. So it is 98 divided by 260. So that comes to 37. So gross profits have actually improved for Apple. So what does that indicate? So gross profit has improved for Apple. That indicates that Apple's efficiency of managing direct costs related to its services as well as products has improved. So improvement in gross margins, or if gross margins between two competitors are higher, it's actually a good thing. Next is operating margin. Operating margin looks at the total efficiency. So it is operating income divided by sales. So operating income composes of direct costs related to product as well as indirect costs related to product too. So operating margin is calculated as operating income divided by sales. So let's try to look at it for Apple. So operating income was 67, sales was 273. So this year if you calculate, it is 67 over 273, 24% operating margin, and last year it was 63 over 260. 63 over 260. So it's almost same. So the efficiency of managing total cost, direct and indirect, is relatively same for Apple. Nothing has changed in terms of efficiency. Next is net profit margin. It indicates net income, that is income that is left for shareholders divided by sales. Now it indicates three parts. It indicates efficiency of managing direct cost, efficiency of managing indirect cost, and also efficiency of managing interest, that is leverage that the company is taking. So it's influenced by all three factors. So it also indicates total efficiency of the firm. So let's do it again for Apple and compare between 2 years. So Apple net income available for common shareholders 58. So it is 58 over 273 this year. 21%, and last year it was net income available to common shareholders 55 over 260. So it's almost same. Again, the efficiency of managing everything for Apple hasn't improved. So if the ratio goes up, it's a good thing. It means that the efficiency is improving. Next are liquidity ratios. So liquidity ratios are two types. What does liquidity means? It means does the company have enough assets, short-term assets, to cover its short-term debt? It means, can the company survive in the short term? If it doesn't have enough money to cover its short-term debt, then it may go out of business. So having good liquidity is extremely important. Now liquidity, we look at it in two ways. Quick ratio is more followed. I'll explain why, but there are two ways to do it. First is current ratio, which is current assets divided by current liabilities, and then there is quick ratio, in which you current assets you subtract inventories and then divide it by current liabilities. Now why quick ratio is more followed is, in current assets there are inventories, and what are you looking for? You're looking for how easy it is to convert those assets, sell those assets to pay off liabilities. Now sometimes it's difficult to convert inventory into cash because you need to sell that inventory to convert it into cash. So it's not good to look at inventory as a liquid thing. Maybe it is not possible to convert it into cash. So that's why quick ratio is a powerful tool than current ratio, but both are followed. So let's look at Apple again, current ratio and quick ratio. So I'm going to Apple. It's current assets, and these things are there in balance sheet. So I'm going to balance sheet. So total current assets for Apple, this is 20, they have data till 2019, let's say. So we are okay with that. 162 current assets are 162, current liability total current liability is 105. So if you look at current ratio, it is 1.454. It means if it is higher than 1, it means it can easily cover its short-term obligations, right? And ideal is 2, but it's a tech company, so and it has a lot of cash reserves too, so that also plays a role, but that's okay. That's not a bad ratio. Now let's see over time what has happened to it. Now current, if you look at 2019 or 2018 current assets were 131 and current liabilities were 115. So it is 121 divided by 115. So you can see current ratio has actually improved. It went from 105 to 1.54. So it means liquidity position for Apple is improving. That's a very good sign. Now quick ratio, you just subtract inventories. So under current assets, total current assets, there will be inventories. So total inventories you subtract. So let's do it only for 1 year so that you get an idea. So 2019 total current assets were 162, total inventories were 4. So out of that 162, 4 were inventory. So if you want to calculate quick ratio, it is 162 minus 4 divided by 105. So it's a little less than, so quick ratio is generally less than current ratio, but it is a better measure. Next is efficiency or asset turnovers. So what does this indicate? Asset turnovers indicates how much sales are you generating for the assets you have. So how are you using your assets? are you efficiently using them? So if this asset turnover ratio goes up, it means you're efficiently using your assets. You're generating more sales for lesser assets. So that's a good thing. And if this ratio goes down, then it's a problem, because then there are inefficiencies on using your asset. You're not that efficient as you were in the past. Now asset turnover has a problem because it considers total assets. Now total assets has goodwill and non-fixed assets too. So it is little bit inappropriate. So it's a better ratio is fixed asset turnover, because it indicates only fixed assets. That are fixed asset means the plant, machinery, all those things. So fixed asset turnover is a better ratio than asset turnover. But both these ratios you calculate sales divided by total assets. So let's do only one ratio for Apple. So total assets, gross total is 338 billion. So Apple is a big company. So total assets is 338 billion, and sales for Apple were 273 billion. So how would you calculate it? It is total sales generated divided by assets used. So for every asset it has, it is generating 80 cents in terms of sales. And again, asset turnover, asset efficiency, asset turnovers, if they are improving, if they are increasing, then it's a good sign over time. Or between two companies, whichever company has the higher asset turnover ratio, that means it's more efficient. Next is working capital ratio. This ratio means how are you using your short-term capital, right? Working capital is your short-term capital, right? How are you using money for short-term purposes? So first is account receivable days. So it is account receivable divided by average daily sales. Now what does this ratio indicate? It means how much time does your customer take on an average to pay you. Account receivable days means how much time does your customer take, to pay you. Okay, so I'll explain it when we do it for Apple. So going back to income statement, we need sales. So 2019 we'll look at 260. So 260 is the sales, 260 billion is the sales. We divide it by 365 to find average sales. So on an average, this much sale is 0.7 billion sale is happening every day. Now we will go to balance sheet and find out account receivables. So net account receivables is for 2019 is 22 billion, 22.926. So how do you find it out? So the formula is account receivable divided by average daily sales. So 22 divided by 0.71. So on an average, a customer takes 30 days to pay whatever sales the Apple is generating. Now Apple sales are not only iPhones, it is services too. That is why it is less, because services you pay and then consume. So that changes things a bit. But on an average, for an Apple customer, Apple takes 30 days to recover money from customer. Now let's see what was it in 2018 and compare it. So account receivables net in 2018 were 23, and going to income statement. Sales were 265. So first is 265 is the yearly sales. We divide it by 365 to find daily sales. So average daily sales, and 23 was the sales, so divide by this number, 31 days. So Apple has improved its collection policies, because it used to take 31 days in 2018 to recover money from customer. Now it takes only 30 days. So that's an improvement. Okay. So that was account receivable. Next is inventory days or inventory turnover. Inventory turnover tells you how efficiently a company manages its inventory. So how efficiently it converts its inventory into sales. Inventory turnover is calculated as cost of goods sold divided by inventory. So higher the turnover, better, because higher turnover means you're turning over your inventory faster. You're making more sales. You're converting it faster. Okay. Next ratio that we are going to discuss is an important one. It means it's an interest coverage ratio. What is interest coverage ratio? Interest coverage ratio is how much money does the company have enough money. It indicates, does the company have enough money to pay its interest? Does the company have enough money to pay its interest? So I'll calculate it. So it is generally calculated by EBIT or EBITDA. So you can consider any of this and divide it by interest payment. So formula is earnings before interest and tax, EBIT divided by interest, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization divided by interest. So let's do it for Apple. So if you see, it will be in income statement, EBIT. So EBIT is given for 2019. Well, let's do it for 2019. 63. EBIT is 63, and interest payment will also be given. Interest expense. Interest expense is also given, that is 3.5. So how do you calculate interest coverage ratio? It is EBIT 63 divided by 3.5. So Apple has 18 times more earnings than its interest. So it can cover its interest payments easily because its earnings are 18 times bigger than its interest payment. So this also indicates long-term survival. If it doesn't have enough money to pay interest, then long-term survival of a company becomes an issue because it has to raise new debt or close down its business. So this is an important ratio. Next is leverage ratio. So what is leverage? Leverage is total amount of debt that the company takes. So there are different ways to calculate it. Debt to equity, total debt divided by total equity. Then debt to capital, total debt divided by total equity plus total debt. So mostly we use debt to equity ratio, not debt to capital, because capital also looks at the overall business. Means instead of only looking at equity component, it also looks at debt component, but more followed is total debt to equity. Now the logic says more debt the company has, more money it has to do the business, so it can expand very fast. But when the times are bad, like example COVID-19 has come and everything has stopped, so debt kills during bad times, but debt is good during good times, because when you take on debt you can expand your business, you can do more sales. But if you have large amount of debt, when the sales stop happening because of some COVID-19 stuff or recession or anything, then it becomes a big issue. Now if you see oil and gas companies, they have racked on lot of debt. So interest payments were extremely low in the last 5 years. So a lot of companies were taking on debt and no one expected this COVID-19 to hit. So that's why balance sheets were pretty heavy. That creates a issue. So it depends on what you're looking at, but generally more debt is worrisome. So less debt is generally preferable. And you can also calculate net debt. So you would have some kind of cash or short-term investments to cover that debt. So looking at total debt is sometimes misleading. So instead of looking at total debt, you can consider net debt, that is total debt minus cash and short-term investments. Now, if you are looking at two businesses that have different business models, like IT company and an oil and gas company will always have more debt than an IT company. So it's sometimes misleading. So instead of looking at only equity component or debt component, we look at enterprise value. So debt to enterprise value is generally used when you're comparing companies between different industries. So it is calculated as net debt divided by enterprise value. And also equity multiplier is important. Equity multiplier indicates how much leverage you have. Leverage is nothing but again how much debt you have taken. So a way to calculate is total assets divided by book value. So pretty much self-explanatory. Instead of using only equity component, we are using enterprise value. We know how to calculate enterprise value, market value of equity plus debt minus cash, that is nothing but net debt. So net debt divided by enterprise value is debt to enterprise value ratio. And equity multiplier, another way of looking at leverage. So if your equity multiplier is more, it means you have more leverage. Now these are important ratios. Valuation ratio means how much is the market, how expensive is the company for investors. If PE ratio is very high, it means the company is extremely expensive. If PE ratio is lower, it means company is relatively less expensive. Now PE ratio also indicates the potential growth that the company has. For example, if a company has higher growth potential, markets will generally pay more. So PE ratio for those companies would be more. If company has lower growth potential, markets would pay less for such companies. That's why PE ratio for those companies are less. So let's look at PE ratio of, first look at Apple, because we have been discussing Apple for a bit. Oh, connection is lost. I'll show it on Yahoo. Bloomberg does that sometime. So if you look at Apple's PE ratio is around 40. It used to be 15, but the market has gone crazy right now, so it is almost at all-time high. It means except the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, it was never this high. So it is right now Apple is extremely expensive at 40 PE. But if you want to look at expensive PEs, Tesla has like PE ratio of 1100. So what it does is, first of all, Tesla is extremely expensive as compared to Apple. Second, markets are pricing in perfection. So Tesla has to execute all its plan to perfection to meet market, to meet the current valuation. So PE ratio is around 1100. So which is extremely high. So the valuation is extremely rich. So it's a good gauge of looking at different companies and deciding whether to buy or not. Now PEG ratio is a very good measure. So what do you do is, in PEG ratio, you divide PE ratio by company's growth rate. So whatever growth rate is there in its earning per share, you divide the PE ratio by that and then compare. And it is very useful for comparing companies like Tesla, who are exponentially growing, or like Zoom. So Zoom was virtually non-existent before COVID. It was not a very sought out company or sought out stock. But after COVID, everyone is using Zoom. So it's in current quarterly report, it had an exponential earning growth. So in terms of that, PEG ratio becomes useful, because PE ratio for Zoom is right now very high, but it is also showing exponential growth. So somewhere that needs to be factored in. So how do you use PEG ratio? So you divide PE by the growth rate of the company. So PE ratio can vary across industries, and high growth generally skews it. One way to capture the idea that higher growth rate is justified by higher PE is to use PEG ratio. If PEG ratio is over 1, the company is generally costlier. If it is less than 1, then company is generally okay. Now even with Apple, what is happening is there is a 5G cycle coming. So every year some people replace their iPhones, so they scale it up. But whenever a spectrum changes, like when 3G changed to 4G, a lot of people change their phones to get access to the new network connection. So the 5G is coming. That's why a lot of people are thinking that there would be a big turnover cycle for Apple phones that may increase the revenues exponentially. That's why PE ratios have gone up. That's what investors are thinking, but it may or may not happen. Next is return on equity. Return on equity is a return ratio, very important ratio. It indicates how much money is the company generating for shareholders. Now one problem with this ratio is it uses book value, it doesn't use market value. So it indicates how much money the company has raised from shareholders, and for them how much net income is generating. But generally it's a decent ratio, even though it has some issues, because when I calculate return on equity I use market value instead of book value, but your book doesn't suggest that, so we'll keep at it. So net income divided by book value of equity is return on equity. Similarly, return on assets. Return on assets are more important for banks, because in terms of banks what happens is all loans are banks' assets. So whatever loan the bank gives are its assets, and how much return it is making on those assets is extremely important. So return on asset is calculated as net income divided by total assets. Return on invested capital is an overall ratio. So instead of only looking at equity, we also look at debt. So how do you calculate it? Take earnings before interest and tax, adjust it by tax rate, because whatever tax you're paying is it decreases the cash flow. We have seen it. Like whatever earnings you get, right, you need to consider it after tax. So what are you doing is you're taking earnings before interest and tax and multiplying it by 1 minus tax. So you're looking at after tax earnings for the firm, not for the equity holders. You're looking at after tax earnings for the overall firm, which includes debt holders as well as equity holders. Because if you just use net income here, that becomes an issue, because net income doesn't belong to debt holders. It only belongs to equity holders, because you have already paid interest. That's why you have to find after tax earnings for the overall firm, that is for equity and debt holders, and then divided by book value of equity and debt. So this is one of the last few topics. So it is dew point analysis, which is extremely important. So I'll go to the final expression and explain it. I'll first read it. You don't need to look at derivations. You need to just focus on the last equation. So this expression says that return on equity can be thought of as net income per dollar of profit margin times amount of sales per dollar of equity. So it's little difficult to understand. So I'll simplify. So whatever returns are generated by the firm for shareholders, whatever returns the firm is making for shareholders are composed of various factors, are derived from various factors. The first factor is how much margin the company has. The better the margins, like better the net income margins, better is the return for shareholders. How is it using its assets? So asset efficiency. So if it starts using the assets more efficiently, better would be return for shareholders. And finally, how much leverage it is taking. If it is taking on more debt, in good times, it can increase the return on equity. But if it is taking more debt in bad times, then the other way around, return on equity would be damaged. So dew point means if you're a manager of a firm and you want to increase the return for shareholders. How do you do that? You either increase the margins if possible, or use your assets in a better way, that is, do more sales for lesser assets, and finally take on debt to expand. That is what it means. So dew point analysis is a very powerful tool. So read this concept in the book. It is explained but not very clearly. As a manager, you have to remember, according to dew point, returns for shareholder only increases by 3 ways. Improve the margins, so do more sales at less cost, increase the sales for less assets, or third thing, take on debt. So they have given an example. The following table contains information about Canadian Tires and Lululemon. Compute their respective ROEs and determine how much Canadian Tires would need to increase its profit margin in order to match Lululemon. Now the Lululemon has significantly higher profit margins because it is a higher cost vendor. The products are more costlier. Canadian Tires competes on cost. That's why profit margins are less, right? Assets turnover is also less. Like for Lululemon, means for Canadian Tire, it is generating less sales for the asset it has. But Canadian Tire has more debt than Lululemon. So if you calculate, we can compute the ROE of each company by multiplying all three together. In order to determine how much Canadian Tire would need to increase its margin, we need to set Canadian Tire's ROE equal to Lululemon's, keep its turnover and equity multiplier fixed, and solve for profit margin. So first of all, calculate ROE for Lululemon and for Canadian Tires. Canadian Tires ROE is 3.9, profit margin, asset turnover and leverage, so 9.2%. Profit margin, asset turnover and equity multiplier or leverage, 25%. So Lululemon's profit margin is return on equity is very good, very high. So if Canadian Tire wants to match it, so you cannot change asset turnover much because your assets are already, like, it has huge factories and stuff, cannot take on more debt. So what you can do is improve margins. So it would need to improve its margins to 10.6% to match Lululemon's efficiency. So Canadian Tire would need to increase its margin from 3.9 to 10.6% to match Lululemon's ROE. It would be able to achieve Lululemon's ROE even with lower margin than Lululemon because its turnover is higher and leverage is higher. So it has more debt. So that multiplies it. That's a multiplier. So one more example they have given. Consider the following data for Canadian Pacific and Canadian National Railway Company. So sales are given, operating income is given, net income, market cap, cash and debt. Compare profit margin, net profit margin, PE ratio and ratio of enterprise value to operating income and sales. So you have to calculate a number of things. So operating margin is operating income divided by sales, net income margin or net profit margin is net income divided by sales, PE ratio, price by earning, enterprise value to operating income, enterprise value divided by operating income, enterprise value to sales, EV divided by sales. So CP, you can calculate operating margin 900, that was operating profit divided by sales, net margin, net income divided by sales, PE ratio, market cap divided by earnings, enterprise value is equity plus debt minus cash. So enterprise value you know, so enterprise to sales you calculate, then enterprise to income you calculate, and enterprise to assets. So once you know the ratios, you can easily calculate it. Same way you can calculate for CN. So you can then compare. Note that despite their large differences in size, CN and CP's PE ratio and enterprise values are very similar. CN's profitability was somewhere higher to CP. So this explains the difference between values. So this is also given in the book. So just while reading through, pay attention. They're comparing two companies which are of different sizes because the market caps are extremely different. Market cap is almost, so it is 9 billion versus 25 billion. So it is extremely high. So financial reporting in practice, even with safeguards such as accounting standards and auditors, financial reporting abuses are unfortunately do take place. One of the most infamous example is Enron. Enron's example has been explained well in the book. So they were trying to sell stuff to their own subsidiaries and means trying to push up the price of the share. So it was a big fraud that happened in the 2000s, and read through the book, it's pretty self-explanatory. So to avoid these faults, different acts has been constituted. So SOX has been constituted in US Congress in 2002. It requires CEO and CFO to certify that the financial statements are accurate, and if they are not accurate, they are held liable. We don't have a similar kind of, like we had a relatively milder version of SOX in Canada, but Canadian firms are smaller in size to American firms, so you can't have very high regulations because then the regulatory cost will increase for each firms. They would not be able to keep up. So that's why regulations are little laxed as compared to United States. But the frauds are also not that relevant in Canada as compared to States. So just try to look at what is the role of auditor, depreciation, what does high debt to equity. So just think about it, because when we meet up in the class, we'll discuss and we'll do some problems regarding ratios and other various stuff.